and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Singapore heads to the polls tomorrow in what is widely seen as a defining general election for the city-state. This is going to be the first electoral test for Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, who succeeded Lee Hsien Loong last May. The ruling People's Action Party, which has been in power since 1959, which is longer than any other elected party in the world, they're now seeking a strong mandate under new leadership. But they face growing pressures over the rising cost of living and calls for more political diversity in Parliament. So let's look today at what is at stake in this election and what it might signal about the future of one of Southeast Asia's most politically stable yet tightly managed political systems. Joining me now is political analyst Dr Bridget Welsh, who is an honorary research associate at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia's Asia Research Institute. Bridget, thank you so much for being on the show. How significant is this general election in Singapore, the first for PM Lawrence Wong? I'm just wondering what regional observers like yourself are paying particular attention to.
It's an important election because it's being framed as a test for the 4G or fourth generation leadership. Lawrence Wong has been Prime Minister for now almost a year, and the campaign for the PAP is organized around him and basically trying to give him the mandate. And what's important is that this is really about the first election that doesn't have the Lee family prominently. The People's Action Party is changing as a party. We can see that in the election that there's fielded 32 new candidates, which is about a third of the slate for the PAP is a new, younger and different type of people. And what we also see is the fact that, Singapore is an example for the region because it is often a bellwether of how much discontent there is. And we saw that in previous elections. So when the government gained vote or lost vote, we can see that the cost of living issue is very prominent. And so I think we will look at Singapore because it is important as a test of how a good government is managing to deal with political pressures in a changing society.
All right. Well, talk to me about this, it being a bellwether for discontent. Are there signs of that? Are there signs that there's voter appetite for more political diversity in Singapore, maybe amongst younger or first-time voters?
So there are essentially, besides the cost of living issue, one of the big issues in the campaign has been political accountability and political representation. And in particularly the issues of representation of alternative views and hearing the different voices of Singaporeans. This has been part of the opposition campaign. In the rallies, we can see that there's a lot more young people participating. Last night for example, in the Workers' Party rally, you could see a lot more young people. Looking at Singapore elections, one can compare it to the 2011 election, where we saw a lot of more younger voices as well. Now, keep in mind that the last election was during COVID for Singapore, so there were no political rallies, so many people might be coming out just to experience it. But the fact of the matter is that the younger voters are an important cohort in the election, and there are some races that are going to be closer. There are 31 constituencies. 31 constituencies in Singapore. And what happens is that there are, some of them are group representatives, some are single member districts. So what we see is a situation where they become more competitive, especially for the strongest opposition party, the Workers' Party.
Right. Talk to me about the Workers' Party, the opposition. So the Workers' Party made gains in the last election. Are you seeing momentum build for the opposition? And what role does the Progress Singapore Party play in this election? There's been comments that it's been splitting the opposition vote. What do you think, Bridget?
Well, you have to keep in mind that the opposition has always been very fragmented in Singapore. There have been smaller parties. We have eight political parties that are running. We have some new parties in the game this time, like the Red Dot United, which people still don't quite understand. But the three main opposition parties are the Workers' Party, the People's Progressive Party, and also the Singapore Democratic Party. These are the main parties, and some of them contest in different places. So of the constituencies in the contest, 5 of them are the multiple parties contesting. Most of them are sort of 1 versus 1. The Workers' Party is running in about 1/4 of the seats, and they are the ones that have been making the most gains. They won 2 group constituencies in the last election, and they're eyeing to try to win 2 more and a single member constituency. So we can see, you know, they're the ones that are seen to be the focal point. And so in those particular areas of Singapore where there's a sense of more competition, you know, the other parties are not as strong comparatively, but there are some contests that are seen to be moderately competitive. Why the Workers' Party is seen as comparatively more successful than others? One is that, you know, some of them don't have clear messages, and others have been seen as being having demonization of their leaders in the past. So the Workers' Party has been the one that has gained more traction by choosing to be almost what people call PAP light. You know, it's calling for greater accountability, greater policy interventions, but at the same time, a different type of policies, more accountability, but not calling for fundamental change. And you know, to keep in mind that even if the Workers' Party won all of its seats, it would still, the PAP would still have 75, almost over 70% of the seats. So it is you know, the opposition is trying to get a foothold in the parliament and build on that foothold as opposed to take over the government. The PAP is going to win, definitely.
Right, but then PAP has also said that you know, they're concerned that any losses or any gains made by the opposition would mean a weaker government, meaning less good governance or less possibility to govern well. And Singapore being often cited as an example, being a highly efficient country. Do you think that this single ruling party, that the strong mandate that Prime Minister Lawrence Wong is seeking, is that sustainable for Singapore in the long run? Or do you think some degree of liberalization, some degree of political pluralism is inevitable for Singapore?
So let's take each of those issues separately. A strong mandate in most elections is to win over 60% of the vote and 60% of the seats. Now, the real question for a lot of watchers in the Singapore election is the popular vote. And I think given that we have some weak opposition candidates and parties in some of the seats, it's likely that this gives an advantage to the PAP in terms of popular vote. But everybody's watching that. The second aspect of that is, are Singaporeans asking for more representation? And I think, yes, we definitely see that. And this is a product of the fact that the society is changing. There are new, the thing that I often hear from voters is they say we want more. And, the PAP has delivered a lot on economic fundamentals and issues associated with housing and others. But there is a sense that, for younger generations and many older generations, that they want the model to evolve, to change, to transform. Greater security, social security in areas like healthcare. And they also want a sense that some voters want to be recognized in this context. So we see those issues that are quite salient compared to the past. And the other impact is that social media has changed the nature of how people get information. The PAP no longer controls the political narrative, and so it has to manage diverse voices. And some of these issues have come up in the campaign. So we can see that this is a transformed society. And I do believe that the PAP's expectations, in the PAP rally, they're calling for a strong mandate because this is This is what they know, and in their own rallies, we could see this in terms of their discourse. But the fact is that I think there is a recognition that Singapore is a different place, with different sets of demands. The question is how those demands can be met.
Okay, so having said all of that, are there lessons to take from Singapore's current political evolution, both in terms of strengths and weaknesses and shortcomings, Bridget?
Well, just to one issue I haven't mentioned, which I think is important, is that the issue about Gaza and the issue associated with the Malay vote is going to be very important. So one of the group, so we have, if we look at the contests in Punggol and Tampines, Jalan Kaya, these are some of the constituencies where there are, seen to be an intense political fight. What we see is that in a place like Tampines, which has almost 25% of the voters are Malays. And this is an issue that has evolved in this process. So why am I mentioning this? Because there's pressures on the government on these particular policy areas. And the lessons is that, you can't control your election even domestically, that these issues come from outside, and in a place like Singapore that is the global environment, the issues of tariffs, the issues of what's happening in the world are coming home. And I think that is an important question. The other issue is that is how you can evolve your policies, how you can change, and this is the real challenge for the PAP, is that the model of economic growth, the model of political representation, is facing pressure, and this is inevitable. We also see a situation where the PAP is used. Grocery coupons, tax cuts, and others. But the voters are looking at the GST and taxes. And so we can see whether or not these types of goodies are adequate, or whether or not the voters are actually expecting more. The nature of how to win voters has actually shifted. And, the PAP and Lawrence Wong faces a real challenge because he doesn't have the legitimacy of the founders of the past and others. So this is a new generation of leaders, and so for all of the region, what is at stake is how do you actually build credibility with your voters? How do you translate policies into success in terms of acceptance and support? And the PAP will do well. They do. There are discussions of policies such as housing, such as foreign talent in the context of Singapore, but the external environment is much harder to control. So expectations have to change.
Right. Bridget, so let's look. So you said PAP will win either way, but what if they don't get that strong mandate that they so desire? What if they don't get the popular vote above 60%? In 2020, it was 61%, so already the lowest it's ever been. What do you think that would mean for Singapore's political system? How might it impact, the results of this election impact if it doesn't go well for the ruling PAP?
So, Singapore sets high standards, and those standards are not normal international standards in terms of performance. And I think one should, just step back and say, if they won 51% of the popular vote, they've done well. All right. Malaysians knows this very well. It's a question, you do want to win enough seats to win the parliament, which the PAP will. And then you want to, so I think the standards are out of whack from a perspective of global perspectives. There will, however, be consequences if there is a very significant drop in popular vote, which I don't think will be the case because of the nature of the contest. But I think popular vote, is things that swing at the last level. It's a mandatory election and compulsory voting, so 94% of Singaporeans vote. The other ones are overseas. All right, so that changes the composition of what is happening. But if there is they don't get the strong mandate, there may be some pressures on the leadership internally. There also may be, a degree of a step back and figuring out and reflection on policies. One hope is if that's the latter, they'll be looking for better solutions. But I expect that the mandate will be strong by international standards, irrespective of what happens. But everything is always about perceptions and framing, and we'll see how that evolves.
All right, Bridget, thank you so much for speaking with me. That was political analyst Dr. Bridget Welsh there. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about what to watch out for in Singapore's elections as Singaporeans head to the polls tomorrow. Joining me now is Associate Professor Dr. Chong, who is from the Department of Political Science at National University of Singapore. Dr. Chong, thank you for being on the show with me today. Maybe we can begin our conversation by you helping us understand what's at stake in this election, especially for the PAP, for the 4G leadership, and for Prime Minister Lawrence Wong personally.
Right. So this is Prime Minister Lawrence Wong's first election leading the PAP. So I think he is very keen to demonstrate that he has the support of Singaporeans. So that's for him and for the PAP as well. They've got a little bit of a challenge here because when, as many of your listeners might know, Tharman Shanmugaratnam was a very popular PAP politician before he became president. And so he did very well in the presidential election. So Lawrence Wong, as the person who stepped in, has to try to approach that 70%. It's a really, really tough call, but that's the situation that Lawrence Wong and the PAP have set themselves up for. What else is at stake is, or at least the PAP will claim, Singapore's ability to navigate the economic headwinds and the uncertainties that are now present. So that's something to watch as well. But I think one thing more beyond the PAP is, I think for Singapore, there are all these things, of course, are important, but also, how it sees itself as moving ahead as a democracy, right? So that's also at stake too.
Okay, so talk to me about what a good performance would entail, what a strong mandate would look like for the PAP, for Lawrence Wong. We've seen that in previous elections, there's been a downtrend in terms of the popular vote. So what would a strong mandate look like for the Prime Minister, and are you confident that he might achieve it?
So the PAP, I think over the past few election cycles, has averaged out around 60% of the popular vote. That translates to about 90% of the seats in Parliament. So what that means is, I think seat-wise, this percentage of seats is not going to change very much. So it's going to be that popular vote. And as I said, there's that hope of reaching what Tharman had attained. So, above 60% and as close to 70% as possible, I think is what the PAP and Lawrence Wong would hope for.
Yeah, and you're confident that he might be able to achieve it?
So I think things are a little bit unclear right now. Of course, in Singapore, we have no opinion polls, so it's hard to tell for sure. And things can be in flux. So it's possible, technically possible, for the PAP to even lose a GRC or two, but increase the popular vote if other constituencies do really well. So that's why it's, in our context, it's really difficult to tell at this point in time.
Okay. Well, talk to me about what you're observing, just in terms of the opposition. So the Workers' Party made gains in the last election. Are you seeing momentum build for Singapore's opposition? Are you seeing a growing appetite amongst Singaporeans for more political diversity in representation?
So I think there is a growing appetite for more diversity and representation, but it is also generational. So I think middle-aged and younger voters are more willing to have diversity, but I think the slightly older voters are probably a little bit more conservative in their outlook, they're a little bit more cautious. So there's a generational difference. So that's one thing. The other is, I think, to the earlier part of your question, the WP has been gaining momentum, and this is evident not just in the vote. We don't know the vote now, but what is evident is they've been getting very good candidates. So people are willing to take some risk to their own careers to stand with the WP. So I think that makes a difference. And there is some of this pattern replicated as well with the Progress Singapore Party and the SDP, Singapore Democratic Party. So these are the big opposition parties.
Could you just elaborate on them? What's the significance of these newer opposition parties? How are they challenging the traditional political narrative? How are they adding to the diversity of representation? I'm just wondering, because there have been comments that, well, essentially they tend to split the vote. How do you view it?
So for the main opposition parties, there is a distinction among them. I think it's very clear that the Workers' Party is centre-left, and then the PSP is pretty centrist, and the SDP is to the left of the Workers' Party. Now, so this is seen in their views on social issues and things like that. Now, the difference in terms of splitting the vote, that isn't actually going to be so much of a case, because the main political parties have basically contested in different areas. Where the split vote comes in is when we have a lot of these smaller political parties, which is the other point I was going to make. Well, I think what we're starting to see is a consolidation of Singapore's opposition politics. Meaning to say that the smaller parties are getting more and more sidelined, and there's going to be a coalescence of support for the bigger opposition political parties.
Okay, so this is interesting. Do you see this as a maturing of Singapore's democracy? I think also I'm wondering what this election means for Singapore's political evolution, regardless of how well the PAP does and how well the opposition does. What would any result mean for Singapore's political system and its maturing evolution?
So I think apart from the opposition consolidation, if we see more acceptance of pluralism, a more demanding electorate in terms of wanting MPs to actually represent their different interests, that is representative of Singapore moving towards in the direction of a maturing democracy. If it's still going to be a lot of the sort of old fear of uncertainty, and the discussion really is extremely localized, then I think we probably still have a further way to go.
Right. You mentioned a little earlier that there were generational differences in how voters are approaching the polls this time around. Can I ask you what, in particular, young people are looking at, or what they're desiring from this election? The previous one was it was a pandemic poll, so things are probably different now post-pandemic. What are your observations about what young voters are talking about, what they're seeking for through their ballot?
Right. So young people, I think, are seeking opportunities. They're seeking ways to move forward. And I think this, in part, dovetails with the uncertainty that we see now has amplified this. But the sort of old ways of, you get a stable job in a big corporation, that stuff isn't working as well anymore. So I think younger people are looking for more opportunities, which means to say that the sort of older narrative of, okay, it's just stability, you just sort of play by the rules, that might not work as well for younger people. So they're trying to explore different things, and that translates into some of the way that they look at politics too.
Okay, and how has the PAP had to recalibrate its messaging or its policies and narrative in response to the changing Singapore society? I noticed there were 32 new candidates from the PAP this time around, so a slate of new faces. What does that tell you?
So the PAP has been trying to make themselves younger. Now, the slate of candidates also has to do with the fact that Lawrence Wong is trying to leave his imprint now, because they have delayed the whole leadership transition because of the issues about who is going to take over. But for the PAP, this creates a pretty interesting situation where they have to sell the stability message to the older voters, but they have to sell the innovation and change message to the younger voters. And as you can see, there's a tension in this. So that's why there's this. If you look at the PAP messaging, they're really struggling to attend to both sets of concerns.
All right. And do you think these elections are primarily driven by cost of living issues, housing issues, inequality issues? Are there other factors at play, coming from Malaysia, where race and religion are often heightened during election season. Is that the case for Singapore? Have you seen anything in this election cycle?
Yes. So I think primarily it's still cost of living, it's still housing, but we do see certain issues come up that aren't actually it's interesting. It's not strictly race and religion. It's related, but not completely. So, like in Malaysia, over the past year or so, we've seen a lot of concern over what's happening in Palestine. Now, historically, that has been a Malay-Muslim issue. But what's interesting now, it's expanded beyond the Malay-Muslim community in Singapore and become a sort of younger people's issue. So that also upends some of the older assumptions about Singapore. And in this election cycle, there were Malaysian politicians who were expressing support for particular political parties in Singapore, and also a Singaporean who Islamic preacher who was trying to push, I guess, a more conservative message. So that became a matter of some contention, and in terms of the sharp elbowing, the PAP was sort of suggesting that the Workers' Party was involved in some of this, or perhaps being open to some of this machinations. The Workers' Party came out very early and said, no, we are a party for all Singaporeans. So you can see that behind that backdrop, there's still this tension of religion going on. But I think Singapore is trying very hard to be a multicultural and multi-ethnic, multi-religious society.
Right. Ian, thank you so much for speaking with me. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and all the best for tomorrow as you head to the polls. That was Associate Professor Dr Chong from NUS there, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.